Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Land Use Committee meeting at CB11. My name is Jason Villanueva. I am the committee chair. This meeting is now being called to order at 6:35 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by Andrew Muscane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click through the participants icon. This is obviously more relevant to those that are remote. Those obviously present, you'll be recognized prior to those through the online. I'll work with Angel. So then that way it's not, everybody has an opportunity to be involved. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat, which is online, should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topic. All such remarks should be made on the record when recognized. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand in person and or wait or through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We'll now take attendance by roll call.
Committee members, when I call your name, please answer. Present. Ed Embria. Present. Kevin Crenshaw. Present. Kenneth Crouch. Present. Jessica Elliott is excused. Jessica Morris will be absent. Nelson Rama.
Present.
Thank you. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Vinny Torres. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Candy Vivas Vasquez. We have quorum.
Excellent. Seeing as quorum is present, we can move on to adoption of the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing no objection, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Adoption of the meeting minutes. The minutes from our last meeting, which was actually in January, and we also were able to catch up on a few of the other outstanding meeting minutes that have been sent. Were distributed to committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the minutes from that meeting. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Excellent. The minutes of, sorry, seeing no objection, the minutes from the last meeting are adopted. The minutes for tonight's meeting are being taken by myself.
Jason?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jessica Morris has a question.
Yes.
Jessica Morris?
Thanks, Angel. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, the distribution of the minutes, are they linked in the agenda that was circulated, or are they found in the committee's folder on the shared G drive?
They were attached to the email that was sent to all the members with the agenda.
There were a number, the latest or buried in the chain?
At first.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Announcements. Do we have any announcements? I have none either. Excellent. So we'll move forward to the informational update.
Just a note on this, Carrie King, which will be the second update. She'll be joining us, but later on, she's finishing up the fresh food giveaway on 125th.
Excellent.
Yep, okay. All right, so I was asked to summarize for committee the important changes to community preference that happened in January. So in January of this year, community preference as we know it has changed. Now, just for summary, community preference has meant for years is that 50% of the units in a affordable development in a community, when it's in lottery, when there's a lottery, would be reserved, or local residents would have preference for 50% of those units. The city of New York was sued in 2015 by people who felt that that was discriminatory. And in January, 9 years later, the city entered into a settlement agreement. that said that they're going to change community preference. So community preference will go from 50% to 20% until 2029. And then in 2029, it will go to 15%, no more than 15%. Further, there is a note in there saying that 421A, which we don't have right now, but the idea is 421A is a tax incentive for new development that sometimes requires affordable housing. Well, that in Manhattan requires affordable housing. If it gets renewed and there's a successor 421A, 421A is completely exempt from all community preference. So that would be not 15%, not to 20%, that would be 0% for buildings that are solely 421A. Now, if it is a building that has an MIH or a inclusionary housing or affordable independent residences for seniors, then, so if they have multiple requirements like 421A and these other things, well, then you could have community preference. And this seems to be it. This is final. It will be in effect for every project that starts its housing lottery before April 22nd of next month. So it goes into effect 90 days after the settlement. And the only thing that seems to be a possible exception is that if the state passes a law that requires community preference, well, then that would take precedent over the settlement agreement. I have a 2-page memo if you want to know the details. It's basically nothing more than what I just said. And if there are any questions, I can take them.
Just out of curiosity, so this has been going on for like 9 years?
9 years.
And did the state know they could have made a law in these 9 years that would have kind of made this lawsuit moot?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I mean, then it gives me a little faith that they will, care now.
I agree with it. I'm interested in, I don't know the pretty term, whether it's the judgment or the dissension from the courts.
Well, this is a settlement, right? So this is before you go to court, right? So this is them negotiating, and sometimes the judge, is, trying to be the middle person there, mediator, thank you. And this is what they came up with. I can tell you that, I wrote this with Marie, who works with me, and Marie is like, she's a fair housing advocate, and she thinks that, this is a good thing. And she and I have disagreed about this because from a planning standpoint, I think, if you go through these planning exercises and you plan for more housing in your community, you want it to benefit the people in your community. I mean, I think there's, you are here, your volunteers start giving your time to help your community, and you want to be able to help your community. And if you don't have much community preference, well, that undermines your effort. So I mean, that's me from a planning standpoint. She's like thinking about this from a citywide level, saying, well, everybody needs affordable housing, and it's not good to discriminate against one people based upon where they live. I don't know. So there are different viewpoints on this, but it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal from a planning standpoint, because this community board, not you all, but I mean, your predecessors have supported and fought for and done a lot of things to increase housing in this community. And this isn't grandfathered, like, meaning if they haven't gone through the lottery yet, they don't get the community preference. And so this is effective on things that even though you thought would be 50%, they're not.
Seems to me like we've kind of destroyed one of the few anti-gentrification measures we had. In your professional experience, is there anything else we can do? Like, are there other measures or rules or rulemaking or something that we can do to preserve our communities?
Well, I mean, there's two things. Well, one would be, I think, legislative and political, is you go to your state legislatures and see what they can do about it. And, lawmakers can make magic happen, right? But another side of that would be, what you do is you go for the most deeply affordable housing. And so, it will be benefiting people who qualify for that housing as much and as deep as possible. And so like Timbali Terrace, which is 100% affordable, goes down to very deep levels. A lot of that, the supportive housing has no community preference at all. But, ultimately, that's not a project that's gonna gentrify East Harlem, right? It's gonna be a problem that serves people of limited means. And I think that's what you have to go with, is the idea that, yeah, it won't necessarily be your neighbor here, but it may be your neighbor in Central Harlem or Washington Heights or the Bronx that are gonna benefit from it.
Angel,
Jessica Morris has a question.
Jessica?
Thank you. Thanks, George. It would be great to get a copy of your memo. Appreciate that work. And I think, I'll let Adem speak for himself, but I know, the position that making sure that it sounds like, and I understand Marie's position that this generally is a good thing, especially when affordable housing is developed in neighborhoods that are opportunity rich. Not that East Harlem is not opportunity rich. I think we know that living here but there's a real trajectory of challenge relative to all the work that was done and the opportunity that was opened up through the rezoning and community preference there. So
Right.
yeah, thank you.
Beverly?
Is it any way, legally that someone, when they do settlements, that it can be appealed?
I don't think so. I'm not the lawyer. But I don't think so because it's
They
both
both
parties
agree.
agree.
What if you're not gonna appeal something you agree to?
Yeah.
That's why I'm interested in again, I don't know the term, but I've definitely seen it in the past where, whoever made the decision wrote up why they made up this decision. And I think once we have that information, we could kind of work backwards to then develop a true strategy and have this conversation, because the state level, as you are well aware, is a far reach for us, but the city level is right in our grasp. And I think it's something that with the mayor's housing initiative that's gonna come out with the city of Yes, and the continued conversation of affordable housing is gonna continue to provide this opportunity of, again, what demographics are we looking for to service these spaces within the realms of these benefits and tax breaks that the developers are gonna get. So it's really mind-boggling that they take away the voice of the people. Because the word of community preference to me had to be one of the most unbiased, unsegregated, undivisive terms that I've ever heard as a civil rights activist, let alone a community board member. So I find it very interesting that in an era of diversity and predominantly minorities being involved in these conversations, that this is the resolution that came to terms. So we're gonna have to continue this conversation, as it's alerting and concerning us, but we're pressed for time, and please understand that this will be brought up at executive. This will be addressed with the housing chair while they're looking at the city of Yes, and we'll continue to figure out ways to strategize and concern. As you said, yeah, citywide, great ideas for those high-class communities like Jessica was pointing at that, don't necessarily want to play with these terms, but those of us that are trying to protect the weak and the vulnerable, and I think we need to stop acting like those terms don't exist when it comes to our populace. Like my mother, who's a senior citizen, she deserves recognition for the work that she's done over the last 4 decades. And in that retrospect, I think that she does deserve some preferential treatment. But at least a roof over her head.
Affordable.
Can I just
Yeah,
ask,
absolutely.
Jordan, great presentation, George, thanks. You mentioned around 421A and how that essentially exempts even the 20%, like those projects are exempt from the 20%, which I guess gets scaled down to 15% eventually of the community preference. But then you mentioned if there's like competing, I'll put that for this reference, competing like funding.
Yeah.
You know, like mandatory inclusionary housing. So is there like a hierarchy of impacts there? And then I wonder if that's another way, when we're thinking of just mandatory inclusionary housing as an example, are there ways that those programs or programs like them can back into other community preference?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, mandatory inclusionary housing everywhere, well then, and you use 421A to meet your mandatory inclusionary housing goal, well, then that's a way of getting it. At least you're 15 or 20%. You're not gonna get over 15 or 20%.
There's no way to get it more than that with any other.
Not with the settlement in place. I mean, I think it would be only, well, okay, now, yeah, no, there's no way to get anything more than that locally, right? You can get more affordable housing,
Right.
right? You can get 100% affordable housing, but it would be only that 15 or 20% set aside for local residents.
It's interesting. There's definitely something that maybe we could reach out to Legal Aid Society. I know they're really big on the housing advocacy conversation, and I'm really interested in again, I'm not a lawyer, forgive me, I'm a construction manager, and if anything, I'm good at is reading contracts. But I will say I'm pretty certain there's some type of decision that was written to this so that this judge and or group has justified their position that is now domino affecting, because that's what's interesting to me. A lawsuit happens, and I don't know the
Yeah.
details, but I'm assuming it's a private entity against the city of New York.
I can explain who it
Yeah.
was. So there were Black New Yorkers who felt that they could not get an apartment in a white neighborhood because of community preference, is that they didn't have enough seats in the lottery to, effectively get into a particular neighborhood that they wanted to get into. And so there's a lawsuit. They were they were active plaintiffs at the end, and they got a judgment in their favor, so there are people there were real people who were affected who filed this lawsuit, not like I guess they were sponsored by what were they called? I don't know, there were groups that were sponsoring them, but they were real people.
An actual activist group as opposed to a lobby group per se.
Yeah,
It makes
that's right,
sense.
that's
It
right.
makes sense. But we're on the other side of that spectrum, right? Where we want to protect
Yeah.
the apartments that are in East Harlem, because we see, not necessarily, there's so many play on words today, but I'll keep it as simple as, the people that are vulnerable need to be protected. And that is my interest of why I serve on this board. And I'm pretty certain us having continued conversations about this, we'll be able to at least draft a resolution and start pushing our local officials in a way that can speak to those people that invested specifically within their community. I get it, everything's going into the app world, we're going into technology, and people are losing some association to their zip code. But I need not express the challenges that, as we could say here, for those that are concerned of going into a higher class neighborhood, those of us that are in a lower class neighborhood are concerned about getting pushed out for the higher class.
Right.
That not necessarily will be living here. They won't even be living in the city to develop it, right? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I challenge all of you board members to go to Acris and look at some of the landlords and building owners of the properties of New York City. You'd be amazed at how many of them don't even live here, right? You heard of the recent one who just moved to Florida, so. Thank you, George.
Yeah, no
I think this is a great topic to continue at a board level. I'm really gonna challenge housing and in the aspiration of us unifying and coming to some sort of resolution that can interest our constituents. And that's why I say, I think our leverage is the city of yes thing that's coming for housing. On top of the 421A conversation that I know is happening at the state level.
Right.
Yes.
Very quickly, I sent you, I don't know if it's the final settlement, but I sent you the settlement that was published in January, but
Excellent.
we can share this with the rest of the committee in case people want to talk about it, see what the reasoning was behind it and continue that
If
conversation.
no one's against, listen, you see, I'm very transparent. I'm all for opening up a group chat, us to continue the conversations. Those that don't want to be a part of it, I respect your privacy. Let me know. And I will ensure that we continue, not necessarily just for this topic, but there's some other topics that we need to start addressing. That as time progresses, and some of us will move on, the district will fall short, right? And I'll leave you with that one and the concept of ECF and the Ascension Project as a thought. We haven't had an update in almost 2 years. Right, so that's just a loud thought, and we're gonna continue these challenges, and it's our position to voice the concerns, particularly to those that are voices. They need to see how many people need community preference in our district. I have no issue walking anybody through 125th Street and Park Avenue. You know, those brothers and sisters need housing in this district, and they're already here. So thank you, George. If there's no other questions online or from the board, I'd like to move on. I know Carrie's not here. We'll go to presentations out of respect for everyone's time. We'll go through all the presentations, and should Ms. King walk in, we'll then have a conversation. She's just updating us on a bid. I want us to be a part of that conversation, so I asked her to present. So I appreciate that she was able to get on the calendar today and appreciate all your time. So let's continue with the next portion of our agenda, which is presentations and discussions. And forgive me if I'm off from what I see here. Presentation A is for a request for a letter of support from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's skylight replacement in the Ancient Near East Gallery. Natalie Amari from the Metropolitan Museum of Art is to present. Is that correct? She present online or in person? No, online.
Hi, Chair. My name's Brett Guyard. I'm gonna start the presentation actually, and then our architect will take us through the slides. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it's so hard to do this because I'm never sure where to look. Thank you for having us. So my name is Brett Gard. I'm the head of capital planning at the Met. And I think the last time we were with you all was maybe a little over 6 months ago to talk about digital displays. I'm not sure if any of you were in the room when we did that. But that project you supported, we appreciate that. And the displays have been installed in the Great Hall, which is an interior landmark at the Met. Today, we're here to talk to you about the exterior of the Met, which the entire exterior of the building is a New York City landmark. So anytime we make a change to the exterior of the building, we meet with landmarks. Sometimes it's work they can approve at a staff level. Other times it's work that we go through a public hearing process for. So that's why we're here today. We go to every community board that surrounds the park. We present the project, we listen to your comments, we answer questions. If you support the project, you send a letter to landmarks, and then we can go forward with the public hearing. If you have more information that you need from us, we are happy to send it to you or come back. This project is a long time in the making. The curatorial team has been working on it for over a decade. And it's to reimagine our galleries, which are on the second floor for the Ancient Near East and Cypriot collection. So it's about 15,000 square feet of gallery space. And every time we do these projects, we take the opportunity to deal with the infrastructure above and around these galleries, because it's the best time to do it. They take all the art out, we come in, we deal with the mechanical systems, we deal with the roof, we deal with the skylights. So that's why we're here today. We are beginning to finish our deinstall of the galleries, and now we're getting ready to replace some of the roof. So it covers 2 wings, and the architects will show you in plans what we're looking at. 2 of our oldest wings. So the Met has 21 wings, 21 separate buildings, all jammed together in 4 city blocks. And the 2 wings that this project straddles is one of our oldest from 1902 and another wing from 1917. The 1902 wing skylights, we are just taking the skylights off and putting new skylights back on. That is not going to be part of the public hearing process. That's something that landmarks can approve at a staff level. But in our 1917 wing, we have skylights that are almost over 100 years old. And we have art underneath that actually can't handle natural light. So natural light is, or daylight is good for some art and not good for other types of art for conservation reasons. So we want to put an opaque roof over that. And that's why we're here today, to talk about the change from skylights to an opaque roof. We have a great architecture team, Nada Architects, and Harry Loud from that team, I think is here. Um,
I'm here.
and he will share his screen and present, and then we're happy to answer questions.
Sounds good. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're working in conjunction with Moody Nolan in New York, and the project objectives basically are to address some of the deteriorating skylights, replace one of them in kind with a new skylight, and then one skylight to be replaced with what's called Manel standing seam roof, which is Manel is a nickel alloy roofing that the Met has used in many different places across the museum. One of the goals is to maintain the visual continuity and symmetry of the existing facade, but then also to improve the energy efficiency of the building. So this is just sort of the context or the table of contents of what we'll go through, some historic background, looking at the existing conditions, and then looking at the proposed design. So if along the way anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt. I'm happy to explain more in depth if need be. Okay. As Brett said, the Met is made up of 21 different wings, and so the wings that we're looking at here are Wing J, which is the 1917 wing, and then part of Wing D, which is the skylight directly adjacent to the Great Hall. And so these are the two skylights. So the sort of long, skinny one here along the street front is the one that's getting replaced with the opaque roof, and then the larger one is the one that's getting replaced in kind, so with a new skylight. And you can see that here sort of in 3D in the aerial view, the Wing D skylight and Wing J. And then this is just to look at sort of on the interior where we're adjacent to. So the Great Hall is sort of how you come into the museum typically. And we're on the second floor, directly adjacent to that, off one of the balconies on the Great Hall. Just zooming in just a little bit to give you a little bit easier time seeing that. And then looking at the roof level. So this area of work is the skylight that's getting replaced with the opaque roof. And then this skylight here is the one that's getting replaced in kind. And here, this just shows sort of in section how the skylight works currently today in elevation and then in roof plan. And then really, one of the things that we're trying to do is mimic the Wing E standing seam roof, which is mirrored on the other side of the Great Hall. So that is an existing Manel roof. And so to mimic that on the Wing J side, on the south side of the Great Hall. This is looking at the Wing E skylight from this, or Manel roof from the street, and then looking at Wing J from the 82nd Street intersection. And then just for your orientation, like Wing J is on the south side, Wing D is the Great Hall, and Wing E is on the north side. Again, looking at Wing E from the same intersection. And then this is just showing, so the existing condition today, you can sort of see the blue reflection of the sky on the skylight. And then a photo montage below, which shows how the new standing seam roof will look. Then we just have a few, just sort of to show you what the existing conditions of the roof are today. It's a corrugated glass skylight that sort of laps like shingles down, and it has existing Manel roofing surrounding it. And then on Wing E, this is what the existing Manel roofing looks like on Wing E, which we'll be replicating on the Wing J roof. And then these are just some, so roof plan again, sort of showing you where the work is in Wing J and mimicking Wing E. going through showing the existing plan and elevation and showing what those will look like in plan and elevation again below, and then axonometric. And then I think there's a few details sort of just showing how the roofing will relate to the existing roof. You know, we're adding insulation to better, you know, make the Met perform better. And then these are the existing details sort of showing the existing corrugated glass roof and how that works currently. So I think that's it, Brett. I think that's right. Yeah.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah,
So
sure.
we're happy
So
to
if there,
answer any questions.
yep, of course.
Members of the public or the committee, do you have any questions as it relates to this application? Excellent. If not, then, they're seeking a letter of support for their application as it relates to them going to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. I mean, not expressed, I don't think we necessarily want to hinder, their maintenance upgrade, right? I promise you, LPC would be very thorough in also reviewing, you know, the technical references that were brought to us by the design team. And you had the landlord slash developer that Matt present in front of you agreeing to the project. So, it's in line with our process and procedures. So with that said, I am open to hearing a motion.
Motion
Motion
to
by
give them a
Deb.
letter of support.
Motion to approve a letter of support, second by Candy. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate the time. Thanks a lot.
The next presentation is a pre-look briefing from the Beacon HRA Multi-Service Center project. We have James Sishat of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development and Chris Cirillo from Ascendant Neighborhood Development.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let me share my screen.
And just for context, there's not gonna be no action on this item. This is pre-ULUP, which again, we started about 2 years ago. Effortless with the public developers. With this standard of practice, we're hoping our private developers will start falling in line. So then that way we could give more opportunity, community engagement for our constituents. And maybe have concerns that we are not privy to, for an obscene amount of reasons. So that said, I'm sorry, continue presenter.
No worries. Can everyone see the screen all right?
Yes.
Great. All right, so good evening. Happy almost spring. We missed you all on Valentine's Day. Hopefully everyone had a good evening that night. So yeah, we want to thank the Community Board Land Use, Landmarks and Planning Committee for having us tonight. My name is James Chukov and I'm the Manhattan Planner at HPD, joined by my director, Melissa Otten, and I'll be presenting with representatives of the development team who will introduce themselves throughout the presentation. So we're eager to present to you updates to the Beacon development at the site of the HRA East Harlem Multi-Service Center to fulfill the East Harlem RFP Site A before we enter into ULURP. So let's jump right in. We'll go through a background of the site, introduction to the site, go over proposed land use actions. The project team will introduce themselves and provide a quick overview before we go into affordability and unit mix, and then other components of the site design, programs, and local hiring. So to begin with a bit of background, as Jason mentioned, this project came to be as a result of the East Harlem, well, you know, this is a public project that came to be as a result of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. That was completed in 2016 and developed to provide recommendations to address key neighborhood issues. One of the key housing recommendations was to use public sites to advance 100% affordable housing projects with additional neighborhood resources, such as improving community facilities. And so in 2021, the Beacon project was selected by HPD via a competitive RFP to rehabilitate the East Harlem Multi-Service Center, also known as Site A, and provide housing on the surrounding parking lot. The MSC is currently operated by the New York City Human Resources Administration. So the development site is located on East 120th Street, adjacent to the Nitro Wagner houses between First Avenue and Pleasant Avenue. The applicant for this project will be HPD, and the development team working with us is comprised of Ascendant Neighborhood Development and the community builders. HPD is aiming for ULURP certification later this spring, and the proposed project includes one 21-story residential building that will include approximately 281 units and one supers unit to be developed under HPD's extremely low and low income affordability program, which is known as ELA. And the project will be 100% affordable to households earning up to 80% of AMI. The second building will be a rehabilitated and expanded multi-service center building, which will be owned and managed by the development team. It will expand the capacity of the existing community facility and provide space for both existing and new nonprofit tenants. To facilitate this proposed development, HPD is proposing several land use actions, UDAP designation and project approval, and the disposition of the development site, a zoning map amendment to rezone the project area to an R8 district, and a zoning text amendment to map an MIH area. Additionally, HPD proposes a change in the city map action to correct an inconsistency between the property boundary according to the tax lot and the street line on East 120th Street. So this action will demap 20 feet of this portion you see here on the map of the northern portion of the map street from First Avenue to approximately 97 feet beyond the property line. This will come to the community board as a separate application, but it will be simultaneously certified so that we ensure that we can uniformly move forward with these land use actions and facilitate a post-ULURP, a smooth post-ULURP development process. We know this is a little bit of a complex component, so we're happy to answer questions at the end to clarify anything here. So I will pass it over now to the development team who will speak more in detail about the project.
Great. Thank you, James. And thank you, committee members, for taking the time to hear our updates about the project this evening. As most of you probably know, my name is Chris Cirillo. I'm the executive director at Ascendant Neighborhood Development Corporation, East Harlem-based nonprofit that focuses on developing and preserving affordable housing in the community. And we are very excited to be part of the 100% nonprofit owned development team that will be developing the Beacon project. Our partner for this project is the Community Builders, a large nonprofit organization with a significant presence in the New York City market. And the rest of our development team includes Paul Castrucci Architects, and we have a representative from our design firm here this evening as well, Terrain Landscape Architecture, and Latier Construction, also an East Harlem-based organization, will be our general contractor for the project. Next slide. So just the basic parameters of the project have not changed much since the last time we presented to the committee last June. So we're still proposing a 21-story building. The unit count has increased slightly from the last time we presented. There are about 15 additional units that are part of the proposed project now since the last time we presented. The project will incorporate amenity spaces for residents inside as well as outside, as well as landscaping to connect the new project to the surrounding area, including East 120th Street, and to the Wagner Houses campus, which surrounds the site to the east and to the north. The project, in addition to the residential tower, will include the rehabilitation of the existing East Harlem Multi-Service Center building, which is a 5-story former school currently occupied by a number of nonprofit organizations. And our project will add a 6th floor to that building. And Brian Backscheider from the Community Builders, our partner on this project, will speak a little bit more about the multi-service center component of the project a little bit later in our presentation. Along with our design team and our sustainability consultants, we are working to meet Passive House standards for this new building. It'll incorporate solar PV system, and it will be built to the most stringent resiliency standards as the site is located in flood zone. So we'll be ensuring that all of our mechanical equipment that will serve the entire complex will be resilient in the case of any future flooding events. Next slide. So the updated unit count and unit mix is included on this slide. So as noted, the overall unit count has increased to 281 residential units plus 1 supers unit. We have the breakdown by unit type as well as by AMI level. So the project will be serving a variety of income levels as laid out in HPD's ELA program term sheet. So we'll have a component of units serving formerly homeless households who would be referred from the city's homelessness shelter system. And we'll have AMI tiers at 30%, 50%, 70%, and 80% of AMI. One thing of note, and that was a comment that we received previously, the 2 times that we've presented the project since our team was designated in 2021, we've significantly increased the number of 3 bedrooms in the project. We're now up to 60 3-bedroom apartments, and we're very excited that we've been able to add additional large apartments into the mix. So we're really pleased about that. Next slide, please. And this slide just gives a brief overview for the various different AMI levels, what the maximum incomes levels will be, as well as the estimated rents, and the breakdown by AMI type, by AMI level across the project. And obviously, these numbers are subject to change until we get to the point where we're actually closing the project, and subject to any changes within HPD's program guidelines between now and then. Next slide, please. Additionally, as we've been refining the plans for the building, we've also been working with our landscape design team on further refining plans for the site. And so we've included a few images of our most current landscaping plans. On the left, there's a view looking south toward the new residential building, and this is from the vantage point of being on the Wagner Houses campus, looking at the north side of the new Beacon building, which will be designed to be approachable and friendly, and incorporates a walkway along the east side of our site that we are calling Wagner Walk, and that connects from the Wagner campus down to East 120th Street. And the view on the right side of your screen is the view looking north along Wagner Walk with the multi-service center. On the left side, the new residential tower in the distant background, and the Wagner Houses buildings to the right, off to the north. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Brian Backscheider to walk through where we are with our planning for the renovation of the multi-service center.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to the committee tonight. Happy to be here to give some updates. So as Chris mentioned, an important part of this project isn't just the new housing, but it's also renovating and updating the multi-service center so that it can continue to serve the community and to expand its ability to serve the community. So we've been working closely with the existing 7 tenants in the building to ensure that these designs are going to meet their needs and allow them the opportunity to grow their programming, and that they're active in the full process through the construction and relocating offsite, which I'll talk about, and also the future plans. Okay, next slide. So in addition to expand or improving the experience for the existing tenants in the building, we are also going to be adding the sixth floor to the building to create some really amazing community spaces, an educational greenhouse that we're working closely with New York Sunworks, who have extensive experience in New York with educational focused greenhouses and for students for training, and with PS 206 down the street to find ways to incorporate that greenhouse learning into their programming. We're also identified a need with PS 206 that they don't have a proper facility for a basketball team that is a big interest of the students of the school, and so as part of this site, we are going to be building a full-sized basketball court, middle school-sized basketball court for PS 206 students, and also I've been talking to and exploring other opportunities for other community groups that have interest in using the basketball court, so that this is a well-programmed space. And this court is being designed with consideration for use as a multi-purpose space, and so that it will be able to accommodate large community gatherings as well as the basketball use. Good, next slide. And then to talk briefly about the tenant relocation plans. As I mentioned, we've worked very closely with the existing tenants and focus a lot on designing for the future, but also working carefully to understand their needs. And we know very well that these tenants are important members of the East Harlem community. They provide really essential services for the community, and we have been looking very carefully within the neighborhood to find relocation space, and that space will, be provided to the tenants, but no additional costs from what they're paying now, with, agreements that they will be able to come back into the multi-service center for spaces that, have been designed with their input and, with their continued use in mind. And like I said, we've already been on the ground, and, scouring the neighborhood and talking with brokers. We have some options that we're exploring already. And we'll continue to, ensure that the spaces that we're finding meet the tenants' needs during this temporary relocation period. And that, we do all the building and prepping the spaces so that it's ready for their move-in advance of any construction starting. Next slide. And then last to touch on local hiring and NWBE, it's a significant commitment from the community builders for our projects across the country, and certainly we know it's a priority in New York. Part of the reason that we are working with Latier as our general contractor is their local roots and their commitment to the East Harlem communities to ensure that we have a diverse workforce and a local workforce, and grow those skills locally. And I think that might be it for this. Thank you. But yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by the members of the committee or from the public? See no one from the members? Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
I didn't see you.
60% of East Harlem households earn 30,000 or less. And 33% of East Harlem households are at or below the federal poverty income. Now, when you say that more than you say that these income bands are subject to change. And more than likely, subject to change realistically means those income bands will be higher. So when you say affordable, you're not even touching really the overwhelming majority of people that are vulnerable, that need housing. You say deeper, we're 100% affordable, but you leave out this big number. And I'm gonna say that if this board wants to protect the vulnerable, we cannot allow luxury housing to outpace our low and moderate income families. We have to have a balance where, I'm not saying that we can't let luxury housing build, but you can't have the majority of that and a little sprinkle and not really getting a full sprinkle. And next thing you know it, we done kicked ourselves out. We're not here anymore. And I'm gonna say something, right? This board, some years ago, came up with a concept. And when I was, basically living in Community Board 10, I was like saying, yeah, they're saying the language that I'm saying. But developers and everybody, they weren't getting it. And I saw on a resolution that this board had put together, I saw 3 words that just stuck out. I saw the word income, target, housing. I said, that's what we need. Income targeted housing. The income that's relevant to East Harlem, not some skewed federal metric. Because that's what we don't even have to use this. This AMI thing is for developers' convenience. And it has everybody confused, and we're chasing the ghost. Because, if you were going for a HUD benefit, HUD knows what those numbers are supposed to be. We don't have to know that. You want to come to us to get some free land, to get some higher density. So we want to hear income targeted housing. We don't need to hear AMI. Because it doesn't pertain to us.
Thank you for your piece. Beverly?
Actually, the gentleman just spoke about what I was gonna ask about. And looking at the project prior to today's, presentation, I see a lot of changes. So I know that you increased the buildings, units. But I am concerned that we're just getting a sprinkling for really truly affordable housing that target our community. I've seen that the housing has changed from 2021. You had 17 stories, 249 buildings. Units, 40 to 80 AMI, 30%, 75 units was going to the homeless. In 2001, the AMI was a lot lower than what it is now, in which I understand about the need for income targeted housing for our community. Because as the gentleman spoke of, we're gonna be priced out by the time this building is completed, even though, and you have that senative that on your paperwork, that exact unit mix and affordability is subject to change. And it's not gonna change to go lower at all. So I don't know if there's anything that HPB should be doing right now to target, like if we can keep this targeted income to a certain number, even though, because it's gonna take you years and it takes actually too long. So by the time the building is done, the prices are going so or higher. And if it's 30%, I just see a lot of changes that's made, and especially with the homeless, you have now only 42 apartments that's going there. It used to be 75. So now you went from 30% to 15% that's going to the homeless from 2021. So I'm not happy with all these type of changes every time you have a different a new presentation. We have too many changes that we read about from the beginning. And I'd like y'all to address those.
Thank you for your commentary. Was there a specific question? Yeah.
Yeah, why are you changing, why have you given less to the homeless? Why did it go from 30% to 15%? We had 75%, 75 units at this, at the onset of this. So that's like, that's a big jump, a big decrease for these apartments, and you increase the 80% AMI housing.
Thank you for your comments and your question. We're definitely taking all the feedback into consideration, so we appreciate your input. You are absolutely correct that the homeless set aside has decreased from 30%, or I believe 25% previously, to 15% now. And part of that reason was there were some assumptions in the finances of this project that were assuming that this might have potentially a supportive housing funding. And some of the feedback we had heard in previous community board meetings was that this community board, is potentially already dealing with a multitude of projects with supportive housing, and 15% is the sort of the minimum of the homeless set aside that the city requires by law. And so we figured if we make certain adjustments to the financing of the project, it could still work out with a 15% homeless set aside while trying to, make some other adjustments in terms of increasing family sized units, et cetera. But we definitely hear the feedback about, the AMIs and considering, opportunities where we could boost the 30 and 50 percentile with the development team here. And I can pass it on to Melissa to speak additionally from the HPD side or the developer.
Sure, I'll jump in here with, and James answered your question, but we also heard the feedback that y'all are potentially looking for lower AMIs, or you're concerned that with this caveat that we put under the chart that the AMIs are going to go up, or the income bands are going to go up during the ULURP process. The reason that we put this caveat under the chart is that ULURP is an ongoing process where we collect feedback and we're entering in discussions about the affordability levels. So I wouldn't say that income or the income bands will necessarily always go up. And this is why we come to the community boards for a pre-ULURP presentation, is this is a good venue to collect feedback and see what we can do in the early stages of the ULURP process. So we really appreciate hearing, what you have to say tonight. And we hear you and we'll take that into consideration.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, just a few things. I think moving forward, if there are changes to a project, they should be shared in the presentation. Beverly caught that was reduced, but I don't know why that couldn't have been mentioned without us having to bring it up. Second, George just mentioned how if this community preference thing is happening, we should be going for even deeper affordability. And then three, and more specifically, if we could, the unit count, right? My concern is the homeless and 30% AMI, the 2 and 3 bedroom units allocated to those two are less than 20% of all the 2 and 3 bedroom units. That's probably by design, but what concerns me is, you can't really raise a family in a 1 bedroom or studio. I grew up with a mother and a sister, and at that time, we weren't that well off, and it was a boy and a girl sharing a bedroom and a mother sleeping on a couch. I can only imagine there are probably bigger families than that. And so, this is kind of like when we went back to the last project we developed. I know it was a different circumstance, but it was all for single people or whatever, and it just seems like these targets throw in formerly homeless households, but that doesn't really sound like it is a household, I guess, but it's like the wording, and it's like, I don't see how kids and families are gonna really benefit from this building if they're in the lower AMI, so that's a concern for me.
We appreciate that feedback, and it's something that when we briefed council member, the deputy speaker Ayala in February, we heard that feedback as well. So we're definitely taking that into consideration as we approach ULURP. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you. And just a point of information for all of us. And you've experienced, some of you are a lot more seasoned than me with the board. This is the pre-ULURP, right? They are coming ahead, they are showing prior to their application. So the point is, it's a draft, right? And it's gonna go through 4 or 5 passes before they go. And I appreciate that HPD is, you know, taking the charge and the challenge of coming to us ahead of time, hearing our concerns. So I kind of want that reasoning as to why, you know, excellent work, Beverly, but I need not express to you guys as soon as this goes ULURP and this goes public, which this is public already at this stage. We're gonna have a lot of conversations with our activist groups within the district, right? And then they're gonna have some concern, which I actually welcome, right? To any constituent within the district that's watching this, we welcome you to reach out and communicate with us so that we can voice your concerns to HPD, you know, proactively speaking. So with that said, I'll hand off to George and then Angel.
Yeah, the only comment I want to make is that is about design, and that in 2018, this committee went into a very deep design exercise, studying alternatives on this site and whether the multi-service center stays or it goes. And ultimately, it came to a design that is almost exactly like what's presented, with the multi-service center saved. I actually think the design that's presented is better than what I mean, it's like a little bit different, but if you look at it, the building in the back of the multi-service center and it's like almost exactly the same. And that recommendation went to HPD. I know it went to one of the early design architects. And, you know, I think it's always great and very satisfying to see work that this committee does come out the end of the pipe. And yeah, it's not exactly the same, but that's okay. It shouldn't be exactly the same. It's like the same sort of design spirit. And so, you know, in some ways, I'd like to think anyway, that your work that you put into this in 2018 is being realized here. So. Thank you.
Angel.
You have 2 questions. You have Jessica Morris and then Nelson Ron.
Excellent. Jessica, I'm sorry, you had your hand raised?
Yeah. Oh, you want to share it now?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the presentation, Devin here. Question around the community facility, and, you know, definitely appreciate that the existing, you know, nonprofits will be retained. It says here on the screen, you know, dedicated to new and existing local nonprofits. What has the engagement been like with Wagner Houses on what services and programs that are a priority for those residents? You know, has that changed over time? And maybe has there been conversations around what other nonprofits we fill that space?
Sure, I can to jump in a little bit to say to describe what the conversations we've had with Wagner. We've actually been engaging with the Wagner campus in a couple different capacities. One really from the tenant association side, and we've gone periodically to give project updates and to solicit input around both, you know, the uses at the multi-service center and also those areas where we're, you know, adjacent to the Wagner campus and, you know, the Wagner Walk, you know, connections. And we continue we're on their calendar to go back in early May for another update with the tenant association. We've also been working more with the management side at Wagner to make sure that, you know, what we're planning on the site is being coordinated and done in a way that's, you know, thoughtful and minimizes impacts on the Wagner campus. I guess one of the things that's come out of those conversations is the new ground floor, updated ground floor of the multi-service center is going to have 2 spaces that are 2 different conference room spaces that are going to be available for community groups to use. And that was a direct, conversation with the tenant association and the understanding that there's, a lot of different groups that need sort of meeting spaces. And we think it's a great, addition to the building and is a great way to make the space more activated by more members in the community.
Thank you. I'm writing some bullets that are concerning for us as a board, and we will reach out to HPD because conversation is already going past our 30-minute mark. So I do want to entertain Nilsa, Jessica, and then we're closing. So we can move on to the next. Angel raised his hand to acknowledge the people that. But that being said, Nilsa, then Jessica, and then we're closing, so we go on to the next presenter. Again, this is Priula. We're gonna continue to have the conversation. Board members, email me some of your points so that we can get it invited to HPD as they've done in the past. This isn't a new process, but especially for this existing committee. Nilsa.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm glad that you've been talking with the tenant association. As you're aware, the multi-service center has always been a house for the community and for the community organizations, and we have offered Wagner. They've actually done programs through the mayor's office and Wagner during the summertime, so I'm glad that that practice will continue once it's developed. I just want to reiterate or just ask the question in terms of parking. There seems to be a rumor that potentially the project may be looking to speak to Wagner about using space for parking. Is that in fact a conversation that's happening? Because if it is not happening, then I will urge you to tell the tenants at the multi-service center, because somehow this rumor has gotten started that there may be parking once the project is over for the organizations at the multi-service center.
Thank you, Nilsa. And obviously, we've been working closely. That is not an active conversation. I'm not really sure where that started from. And we can certainly, talk to the tenants about that.
Okay, good. Just because I don't know if it's wishful thinking, but they keep coming to me and I'm like, no, I would have heard something. So I haven't. Okay, so that's good to know. Thank you, Brian.
Feel free to send them our way if when you get those questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Nilsa. Jessica Morris.
I'm gonna pass for pre-Euler, but I think we'll hear from you more. My question was I wanted to applaud both the board for the due diligence and the continued advocacy, but also applaud the development team for this is a big project, and the changes are responsive to our inputs. My question is how much we're moving forward in the process and design continues to a point where you can't really change anything anymore. Do you foresee any potential window for further changes with regard to the comments you've heard tonight, or are things pretty well locked down at this point as far as design development and moving towards filing and construction timelines? Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. We are continuing to progress the designs, with the goal of being ready to start construction soon after closing. So, we're at a time where changes are still possible. We're hoping that there's not too many of them. And we're trying to minimize the impact of changes. But there's still certainly time to incorporate feedback.
Thank you, Jessica. That being said, thank you for your presentation and to the board for your time on the subject matter. We will be now moving on in our agenda to the next topic, item C. Preserving the former Harlow Savings Bank building at 275 East 125th Street. Julius Tehanen.
Tasha Dean.
I'm sorry.
Tasha Dean.
Okay, thank you. Taja Dean, will from Preserve Harlem's Legacy, will be speaking.
So Patricia Murphy's gonna give the historic information first, and then I'll go.
Okay, so the Harlem Savings Bank on East 125th Street near Lexington Avenue will soon face the wrecking ball, along with a two-story corner building next door, mostly recently home to a pizzeria. So anyway, this is a history of it. Building the classical revival story. Built in the classical revival style by architects Bannister and Shell. The building was constructed just as 125th Street was becoming the main commercial thoroughfare in Harlem and helped bolster the image of the Harlem Savings Bank, according to 2003 history by the National Park Service. The former Harlem Savings Bank building is architecturally significant as an example of a classical revival bank erected to support the needs of a local community. National Park Service role of the street is Harlem's principal commercial thoroughfare during the early 20th century. After operating exclusively on 125th Street for a few decades, Harlem Savings Bank expanded throughout the city and the ensuing years, later renaming itself the Apple Bank for Savings. His name remained on 125th Street until the branch's recent closure. So this is an important piece of information. This was a bank created by Black Americans in Harlem, and one of the first Black-owned banks in the New York City area. So I mean, this goes way back, and this was, an important piece of Harlem history. And the architecture is very significant too. The lots at 124 and 132 East 125th Street are set to be demolished to make way for new commercial development. Okay.
So I'm gonna pick up from here. So as implied, that this property is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And it's also on the state Registry of Historic Places. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, as amended, requires federal agencies to consider the effects of proposed undertakings on historic properties. Its goal is to identify and avoid, minimize, or mitigate adverse effects on historic properties. New York State also has a similar law. So my question is, has this developer gotten an exemption from the New York State Register of Historic Places, or the New York State Historic Preservation Office, also known as SHPO? What I would like this board to do is to reach out to the developer and ask it whether they have been following the processes for national and state historic resources. Because what happens a lot of times is that if a certain body is not really familiar with this process, a developer's not going to really tell you. And they probably know they should be doing different things, and they're going to just avoid it, and then next thing you know it, the building's been demolished and no mitigation plan was put into effect, no approval was given, and it's like, we overlooked it, and so we have to, on these precious historic resources, we have to like now be a little bit more aggressive and ask, but we should be knowing that, if they're getting any type of federal funding, they gotta follow this. If they get any type of state funding, they gotta follow this. See, and more than likely, they are getting something from the state, but they still have to get some type of, waiver. Like, they'll fill out some type of form and they'll say there's no real historic adverse impact. they'll justify why there's none. But they gotta fill out, they have to present to you something. So I see this, they're getting, the demolition permits. You know, now they've halted, and I'm curious to know why they haven't moved a little bit quicker. But I think that they're moving too hasty. And I think that, this is something that we need to readdress. So, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And, one of the things, another thing too is like, we're not against them building a new project, but we want them to keep the old building intact.
Well, not so much the old building, but
But the facade of it and the interior, as a lobby, it could be really great entranceway to this new building that they're building. It could be a great entranceway, it could be a lobby area, a receptionist area. You have all the classical architecture, you'd simply preserving Black history and, a Black institution,
an example is the Victoria project. So,
Right next
Yeah,
to
well,
that,
about
the fire department with the Cotty project, so.
Yeah, right on
Right.
that same lot.
And so
I'm
they-
very familiar with the area, but good.
right, so they, we were very, involved in that, and, they convinced Board 10 that the building really couldn't be saved, but we agreed that they would preserve, the facade at 100 feet of the inner, lobby. And, so something like this, the building was built in 1907, so. But some of those buildings, if they're using Mississippi bricks, those Mississippi bricks.
Yeah.
Like they still, you can't break them. People steal them. The Mississippi bricks that they make with iron. People steal those type of bricks. So if, they need to come back. I think we need to hear from them to see if, what they're doing. Because this is definitely a very historic resource. And we shouldn't just be so quiet to let them demolish it. Like it's not, and that's what they do.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your presentation and where, you are as much a reflection as us as we are the working body for you. So your voice is not quiet and we hear you. It's been this committee's prerogative over the last 3 years specifically to focus more on the landmarks preservation aspirations that are a mandation for this committee, which, our member Jessica Morris has been highly and greatly involved in advocacy. So there's a lot of words to say, we hear you, we're gonna look into it.
Thank you.
Rightfully so. I have the same questions, if not more questions, as the chair of this committee. But more importantly, does any of the committee members have any questions? I think that the brother brought it to us rightfully in the sense of advocacy and activism. And it sounds like there's a campaign that's happening from Preserve Harlem's Legacy to save the bank and from a historical standpoint from architecture. So you guys, please jump in.
My question to you is the research that you have, how can you please send it to us? So that
Yes,
we-
yes, very public, but I will.
It makes it easier.
Yes.
Right, because I promise you, when we're done, we're gonna end up with a Frankenstein project, because you guys are gonna Google everything. Next.
I'll be super.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, please forward that.
If you could give us a copy, that'd be even great as well. We'll start work with that. My point is, we hear you. And I'm actually excited about this.
Yeah.
We get so technical all the time at this committee. So we love to get into some of the subjective nature that, that contextualizes our district, right? There's been conversations where we want to go from El Barrio to NoHo, right? So, let's stick to.
I just want to give you an FYI. We try to preserve the women's pavilion. That building that was part of Harlem Hospital. And, there was strong evidence showing that Martin Luther King was brought into that building and maintained for 4 hours before surgery took place. The surgery took almost 4 hours, but they had to, there's a whole history to that. But, so when I was on vacation this past year, a friend of mine, he said he went to the emergency room in the women's pavilion. That's where it was back well, he went in 64, but in the 50s, that's where it was. It was in the women's pavilion. And they didn't have Martin Luther King on the operating table, in the Harlem building right away. He was main, and then we saw pictures of him being strolled on the gurney with the letter opener, and the building inside, because I went inside of the women's pavilion, down the ground floor and below, and the architecture looked very similar. See, and there was also, there was a sign saying the diet office. So did they have the diet office in the women's pavilion? We know that in the back, that they had the children's entrance for emergency. So they were going there. So why wouldn't they have the adult entrance, maybe a little bit, but he said, no, that's where I went. I went into the women's pavilion to the emergency room. So, and now the building is, but we plan to do something, we're gonna let that history, we're gonna do something, so.
Thank you so much, Julie.
I'll be really quick.
No, listen, I can't gag you guys, even if I want to. Trust me, I try.
Right. So just very quickly, do you know the name of the developer or some other like pertinent information, like demolition permit info? Because I live on that block, I've walked right by that, I took a picture actually this weekend, because I knew this would be on the agenda. That second story building's already been demolished, right? And so I don't know how much time we have.
What?
The small second story building that's like right
Oh,
next to
that's
the
next
bank.
to it, right?
Yeah, it's already gone. So I'm wondering if you know the name of a developer or just like key information that we can process today, and then we can look into this further.
I mean, I could get his name, because,
The developers mentioned in several articles online, if you go to DOB.
Yes.
Pull the permits, you'll have to name.
Well, we have.
We have it on hand. Yeah, I can definitely.
And I can speak to you on that from behalf of the board. We have resources to take that information. I stated it's public. You go to Acris, and I'll show you how to look at that.
Cool, okay, then we can definitely.
We can obtain that information as necessary. Again, whether or not it's the actual developer, that's a whole nother conversation, right? Which we all know about the famous term LLC. Angel.
So two things, Jessica has a question, and the developer is Mad Equities with 3Ds.
Okay. The 3Ds.
Tacky. I'm just kidding.
Jessica. You have the floor, Jessica.
Jessica, I think you're muted.
I am, thank you, yes. I think there's a collective recognition, consensus, and agreement that if not more than at least the facade of the bank building has significant value in being maintained, if possible, in any sort of way. I think there's often significant limitations that come along with any sort of landmarking or kind of classification from a preservation perspective that sometimes you're hamstrung by what you can't do because you have to adhere to the sort of truthfulness of the building itself. And so the fact that it's an assemblage from a development perspective, just starting from a kind of ground zero blank slate is by far the easiest, right, way to move forward. However, there's a term, and I just want to make sure you all can hear me. There's a term, and I do have a question coming, so thank you for hearing me. There's a term, a colleague of mine who grew up in the Bronx and did some work relative to that legacy. It's called soul-stalgia, right? Like the places that when they all just kind of disappear and go away, you're left wondering where you are. This is not a place that I know anymore. And I think East 125th Street with all of the vacant sites, Carrie, you know well, and future development all the way out to 1 East Harlem and beyond, I think maintaining those places that have a history and is really critical. When you come up against the wrecking ball and you don't know how much time you have, I think we all face that prospect at the end of life. don't really know when it's coming, but I would urge the committee to find a way to take action, whether it's exercising our voice or supporting other entities who are, and it sounds like formal channels through preservation and preservation processes may be may have expired a bit. So I'm not sure how we can help to put on the brakes and better understand what the design prospect of the site is without engaging a developer or other preservation advocates in the area. And I know that may be difficult. I'm sure our guests in the audience here who brought this to us tonight, Preserve Harlem's Legacy, you're aware of that landscape of preservation advocates in the neighborhood. And I understand there's been conversations previously. So, how do we be supportive if this is something that we collectively agree is worth exercising our voice for? And how do we, encourage a collective, voice throughout the community, others, organizations and representatives who are also aware. Are my questions really for the committee, and I think there's a lot more history of kind of who knows what and for how long and what do we do now as urgently as possible. So please let me know how I can help and support in
And
what we need to do.
Definitely going to be leaning on you for this, because I definitely I have seen this being a great skill set that you're informed of. The long and the short of it, the problem's been brought to the table. It's been initiated, right? First step of any plan of development conception is initiation. Our next step is planning, and that will be the conversation we'll have over the next 30 days. I don't disagree that, time is of the essence, which are what is being brought forth to us. But that being said, we need to be realistic with our expectations, so that, we'll continue having the conversation from a committee perspective, but there's a barrage of things that we can do, from supporting the efforts from the groups that bring this forth to us, as well as even going into a resolution to our elected officials. So those are some of the opportunities we have, as well as to start engaging with our soon-to-be or already neighbor, which is this developer. And that is something that will take action tomorrow morning. So I hope that answers your questions, and I agree with Jessica that we should continue the conversation. If there's other organizations like East Harlem Preservation Corporation or other organizations that are within the district that have the same sentiment of concern, please bring them to my attention, and we'll continue this conversation. That being, yes, David.
You have a question from the public, Ricky James.
Yes, Mr. James, and after you, we're gonna close, so that way we can go on to the next presentation.
Hello, good evening. Community Board 11. My colleagues at the Preserve Harlem Legacy, I'm in full agreement with our chairman. I would think a letter of support from the Community Board will be a powerful statement for East Harlem. We saved the Apollo back in the days. This is a preservation issue. I am a preservationist. Thank you.
Excellent. We hear you. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Moving forward, the register. Oh, yes, we do. Going back to informational updates, we have Kara King from Uptown Grand Central to present on the East 125th Street Business Improvement District. Again, committee, this is a it's a pre-action. They haven't submitted their application. They already went in front of economic development. She's done some community engagement with UGC about the bid. I went to an event a few weeks back and asked Carrie to bring this to land use, because eventually we will be reviewing it under SBS and some sort of deal of action that I necessarily haven't wrapped my head around yet, but we'll get there. Because from what I'm told, this is the last bid in Manhattan. So, yeah, it's really interesting, right? What have East Harlem been doing for the last 50 years? Well, that being said, UGC took an initiative. They're working with local nonprofits, they're working with the administrative agencies, they're being transparent, and without further ado, Carrie King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I pass around? Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Okay, so. Oh, no, I thought that was me. And so this is an article that was in Patch. It just kind of explains, well, it has pictures, which is always helpful. So we take one of those and pass it around. This is frequently asked questions, which is also on our website. That's on our website too. And then this is the ballot of support that people are filling out. It also has the map. So you'll be able to see the map of what the proposed district is. It's a lot of paper, I know. Keep going on.
I bet you'll give us the point.
Sorry. But yeah, this is not the full briefing. The full briefing will be a big long PowerPoint with lots of information. But basically as your friend said, we have been.
I'm sorry, Carrie.
Yes.
We're not gonna become experts on bid tonight.
No.
It's a briefing and update. If you got a question, I promise you, we're gonna continue to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is like, 3 minutes. I can go fast.
Thank you.
It's late. But so basically about 2 years ago, we started bringing people together. The Department of Small Business Services asked us, kind of said, this is what we should do. And so we've been having meetings with various stakeholders, specifically along East 125th. And if you look at the map, you'll see that it is the map that's in the article was printed a while ago. If you look more specifically at the map that's from our website, I just realized I was looking over your shoulder. I realized that the map on the news is a little old. But so basically we started coming together and looking at all the different elements. I can get into that whole thing in the PowerPoint later, but basically you have to decide your boundaries, which are in the green on the map. And you have to decide what your vision and your goals and your budget and your services are gonna be. Bids are generally any neighborhood where you walk in, commercial district that you walk in Manhattan, you're like, it looks kind of clean, looks kind of safe. They're like flowers and banners and stuff like that. That's because there's a bid there. East Harlem is the only community district in Manhattan that does not have a bid. So, it's time to right that wrong and get this going. So we've decided all of those things, the boundaries and then the most difficult part is the assessment, right? So the way that bids are funded is the property owners pay, an assessment that then becomes the budget of the bid. Everybody that's in the green map will pay the assessment. It's not an opt-in or an opt-out, you're in. And it's just in your tax bill. So that's always the most difficult thing, is trying to figure out how do people want to pay more money. People do not want to pay more money in general. But we currently have 73% of the assessed value of the area saying yes, which just goes to show that the stakeholders in the area do feel that cleaning and public safety are very necessary to make that a cohesive and enjoyable, livable neighborhood. So currently where we are in the process is we're in the outreach phase, and there's different metrics that we have to hit for SBS. We have to get percentage of assessed value, percentage of tax lots, percentage of commercial properties, percentage of residents, there's like 9 different things you gotta get. So we're working on all that. I'm on the streets 2 or 3 days a week getting signatures. But it's very specific because we don't really need signatures from outside of the green. The people that they care about are people that are inside the green, because those are the people that are gonna be paying and be affected by the services. So it's going pretty well. And we'll be back later with all the specifics, but just want to make sure you guys know that what's going on. We're trying to push it as quickly as possible because we want to get it in. The way that it works with the cities, it'll go through kind of like a ULERP. It has to go through city planning, interagency meeting with all the different agencies, city planning, come to y'all, and then it has to go through city council. And then to actually be implemented, it has to go through the state comptroller, then it has to come back to the city, and then it has to go into the state's tax. And that has to hit by the tax bill. So we're trying to get this money so we can clean these streets. So we're trying to get it to hit, we're trying to get it to hit by July 2025. So we're trying to beat this thing along. So that's that.
Gary, and thanks for, recognizing for the question, for the comments more than a question. This is a long-standing ask of this community board.
Yes, sir.
Like, yeah, cowboys on. And, I always like to speak up when something's been sitting around and waiting and dusty on a shelf for a while and it's finally coming to fruition. One, so because it deserves recognition, but also as an encouragement to board members, right? We deal a lot of times with things that, don't happen right away, and we, may develop attitudes of like, oh, this is just frustrating and why do we bother? And you have to stick with it, right? And the things that, that are most important, can bear out in the long run if we're dogged about it. And in this instance, this is something we've been asking for. The board has been asking for it because it was already dusty before I got hired, and I've been here for a while, and now I'm dusty. And so it's wonderful that it's made this much progress. And I also wanted to, compliment Carrie and compliment this community for having Carrie. This is a force of nature that has moved into this neighborhood and has really helped to push a ton of stuff, right? Has come right into line with all the previous forces of nature, right? And that are, they're around still, but they're not as forceful. Carrie, has her fastball right now, so we're benefiting a lot from the work of this person and the group that she, that has coalesced, that she's working with, has coalesced around this effort. So it's very exciting to see this much progress. I've been on a number of these meetings, not all of them, with SBS, and there has been a ton of progress. Where we started off, where it started off with, kind of questions, a lot of hesitancy. There has been a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm amongst that group. So it's great to see, and that we're at this point of getting presentations of the community board and the ULURPs in sight is very exciting, and I just wanted to, again, congratulate Carrie on the work that's been done so far and the community for what hopefully will come to fruition. That's a corridor that, those of you that have been in East Harlem forever know that time forgot, right? I was talking to George about this, I would travel on my bus from uptown across 125th Street, and once you cross Fifth Avenue, you're like, where'd everybody go?
Yeah.
And we've had some development and some changes, but it's spotty. If you look at it from above, you're like, what happened? So we still have a ways to go. But I think this is a real step in the right direction, so that when, those lots are filled with positive activity and an opportunity that, that the community is benefiting from it. The last thing I'll say is, what preceded the bid formation conversations and Uptown Grand Central was the Northern, whatever the heck you called it, New East Harlem Merchants Association. Good nickname, but the long name was terrible. And that took the task of trying to clean up 125th Street, trying to keep it clean, an impossibility, right? But trying. Why? Because the neighborhood deserves it. And also because the businesses that are on the neighborhood deserves are suffering as a consequence of the conditions there. So someone's had to try to fix this stuff. So that initial effort hopefully will evolve into a bid that will be our lifeline once those properties are built and, we have these businesses here that are gonna try to, sustain themselves. It's something that's, I think, very exciting, right? I promise this is the last time. There's a coffee shop on 125th Street and Park Avenue. In that building, right? So I started here sitting at the table with Candy, and that building was a wreck. Right, and people throwing all kinds of ideas, what are we gonna do? Eventually it gets rebuilt. The building is empty except for the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Has been empty for years, except for the coffee shop. So I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but some of the reasons are the conditions on the street. Like, if you're looking to lease at these prices, are you gonna move your status? And that's so sad because it's such a beautiful building, right? Like, that should be, considered for a logo for the community, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm surprised.
But we can't fill it, so you know, all that to say that, you know, hopefully this is yet another step to kind of get us there, whatever there is gonna be eventually, but hopefully there that represents the interests of the community and the work of the community, right? Like, you know, Candy was a newborn when we started.
And I just want to say thank you.
The revitalization of these, thank you for your comments, Angel. I'm sorry, Karen, we're just.
Jess has a question too.
Yeah, we're gonna go to Beverly and then we're gonna go online. But I'm sorry, you wanted to respond to Angel?
I was just gonna say that just by it being in district needs for so many years, from
Yep.
just like to echo what Angel said, like whenever a city agency or anybody's doubting, because a lot of bid efforts do not succeed. But like, I'm like, it's in district needs, like, people want this, you know, like, so there's no sign of wavering, and that's large part of the work of the community board.
Yeah, from my conception as chair of district needs prior to transferring over here, when we created that committee from day one, it's always been asked, it's gonna continue to be asked. And I agree with Angel, there's been a lot of nonprofits that put a lot of work into cleaning up the district. Unfortunately, you know, we live in a capitalist society, and the more resources that we push into revitalizing East Harlem, the better benefit for our existing constituents. Beverly?
Yes, my question is regarding the, people that's gonna be paying into this. I noticed that the National Black Theater on corner of 125th Street is not part of that, and I'd like to know the reason for that.
There's that one lot, on both the north and south side of the
Yes.
street. That's where, so there's that little square on the south
Yeah.
side and then the rectangle north. They have been in the 125th Street bid. So the bid that's on the west side. That's been around. Yeah, it was like a little carve out, I think, when it was created overnight.
Yeah, these, yeah.
We would love to have it, but you actually can be in two bids, but that is a very rare choice of an organization to choose to pay. There are some that do it, but not a lot.
Would they benefit from being in two bids?
Double cleaning, I don't see why not, but it is, you know, they are a nonprofit,
Yeah,
so.
they wouldn't be affected because of assessed value as a nonprofit. Well, we can continue that conversation.
Right.
Online, who you said was online?
Jessica Elliott.
Jessica Elliott, please. And then after
Hey,
that,
everybody. Can you hear me?
Ben Tom.
Okay, sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but I just wanted to say thank you, Carrie. And you know, I've been so supportive of your work with Uptown Grand Central, especially as it relates to this bid. I'm really excited to see it moving forward. And I just wanted to say that I've been working closely with Barbara Askins from the 125th Street bid that you just mentioned. And I know that there's been, you know, some troubles over the years between, you know, East Harlem, Central Harlem. And I just, you know, I think that it's time that, you know, we just start reaching out to each other again and start being more in partnership together. And I'm happy to help facilitate that in any way that I can, but I'm sure there's plenty of lessons learned from their group and ways that we can work together and sort of bridge the gaps between our communities. So I hope that we can help make that happen, and I'm happy to help however I can.
Thank you, that's great.
That being said, any other questions, concerns, comments, announcements? Old business.
Yes, Tamale Terrace was approved by city council last week.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Tamale Terrace,
Oh, okay.
Tamale Terrace was approved by city council last week, and also, oh, I don't know, maybe, it's still called that, on the application, that they approved, but they may change it. And then, City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, passed city, planning commission with literally hundreds of changes. Basically based upon comments that they received from the public and from the community boards. A lot of them were really small, but you know, there are some substantial changes, especially in home occupations. They seem to have heard a lot of comments. They didn't, you know, they're much more open to taking comments. So, you know, your comments are being read, they're being heard, and at least some of them are getting adopted.
Feels good to hear that.
Did you, real quick, so did you see anything that we commented on that they incorporated, or they?
saw your final comments, but I know like in discussion, we talked a lot about home occupations. And one of the things that they did, they made changes to home occupations to make them smaller. They have a maximum size on it now, so it's no longer unlimited. You now have a hard limit of 1,000 square feet. And, you know, this is not the final word because city council now has to take out their red pen and they'll be making changes as well. But home occupations, you're not the only ones that made comments on home occupations. All the boards did, and they were like, all right, we gotta do something, and they did.
But yes, Candy, if you want, I'll reach out to Jose and I'll ask him, can you tell us specifically what you changed for us? Because to answer your question, they have told us time and time again, they made modifications a lot.
Yeah.
Because of the efforts by CB11, because a lot of boards did not respond. So I thank you for the, you know, for the affirmation of our work. I don't need to speak for others, but I know myself being on the board for almost 10 years. It feels good to hear something goes through, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Miskane?
That's aimed to you.
Yes, sir.
So just piggybacking on what George said, so and what Candy was asking. So I don't know if the project name has changed, but the Jazz Alliance has changed their name to Belongo.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they're pronouncing it Belongo or Belongo or
Belongo,
something,
I
but yeah. That's pretty cool. I actually had an opportunity on my own time to visit their youth jazz ensemble. Unbelievable. It's crazy. Anyway, that's like, and then with the City of Economic Opportunity, DCP did forward a list of responses and changes, so I'll forward that to you all.
Excellent, and you know, just one more point now against you, Julius, you know, they've also, a lot of the developers, especially the nonprofit developers that meet in front of us, they give every opportunity, no favor, unbiasedly to all community members, board members, constituents to go and visit their space. I can't speak off the top of my head, but I do remember, you know, when we were going through that application, they were asking if you would like, come to Brooklyn, come see what we do, as one example, and what's my point to board members? I know it's been a tough challenge of the transition of going from, for lack of a better word, virtual to in-person to now hybrid. But I implore you, there's nothing like going there, seeing it, touching it for yourself, smelling it, tasting it. So when you speak upon it, you're opining from a position of experience as opposed to what I'm very concerned for my future grandchildren, which is they'll just be downloading the information into some chip. Julius?
Yes, George, that project with the modifications, now that's gonna come back to the community board again, a shorter time?
No.
So it's not gonna do a full.
No, it's always one way and it ends with city council.
But if they do the modifications,
Mhm.
then there's a FUCA action?
It never comes back. It's always one way in Euler.
Well, there is a FUCA action.
I don't know what a FUCA
It's
action
a
is.
follow-up corrective action that the board gets a chance to opine again on those modifications.
Okay, that's not how Euler, the New York City, uniform land use procedure works. There is no, it's a one-way street and it is always a one-way street. There is no follow-up actions. It never goes backwards. Except for environmental review between city council and the city planning commission. That's the only time.
125th Street did do that. 125th Street rezoning. Did go back and did a FUCA process. Yeah.
So you know what, I think we can continue this conversation
Yeah.
offline because, you know, getting to tomato, apples, oranges is semantics, and we could further discuss, you know, other options, but I don't necessarily disagree. We looked at Timbala Terrace, our faces turned blue, with the 6-page resolution that we wrote. Angel.
Thanks. So one last thing, until the next last thing.
Yeah, it's 8:30.
That's all right. It's almost 8:30. I'll take my full 6 minutes.
Yes.
So talking about former projects and revisiting and stuff, what I heard is on 127th Street, Artemis is building on 127th Park Avenue is complete, and red brick building with the stars on it. I had an opportunity to visit it yesterday, got a tour. It's awesome. On the corner of that block on 126th Street, Artemis owned a lot, owns a lot. Next to it, HPD owns a lot. And then there's the lots where the new building is. Years ago, Artemis came to us asking for a letter of support for them to engage HPD in a site control conversation. Goes back to HPD, negotiates, thick quotation marks with Artemis. And they couldn't land on, well, they couldn't land on an agreement with Artemis. So here Artemis tells it, HPD was playing particularly hardball, and what resulted is you have an empty lot there that is very unlikely to be developed. Is it possible? Things are possible, it's unlikely. And it's too bad, because if those lots would have been incorporated, and you get more buildings, more units. And then the last thing I'll say, because I get sentimental sometimes, as I'm exiting the building on the tour, there is a family moving into the building, young African-American family. And they're moving stuff in taped up boxes, moving into the lobby. And I like to think that these buildings can be life-changing. So it seems like they're, probably, affordable unit tenants. Moving into, when I tell you Uber luxury building, the lounges in this thing, you'd give a leg to live in it, and they're accessible to everyone, right? But there's multiple lounges, and there's a pet washing station, there's multiple roof terraces. So, I'm so happy for the people that are gonna live there, and there's gonna be a number of people that are, like lower income folks. But it could have been more if HPD would have done a slightly better job in negotiating that deal. And instead they, I guess, played a certain hand that put at risk nothing happening on those two lots, because they're in the way of Artemis's other lot, right? So it's just something like that I think we should keep in mind for the next time we have a similar conversation, maybe push them a little harder to get to a deal. Not that it has to be deal A or deal B, but that it certainly shouldn't be a deal that leaves out something that could have further benefited our residents.
Or even access, how we felt.
They never came back around, right?
Yeah, and I hear you, because my automatic thought is, I want that letter of support, and I want a conversation with HPD to see.
Why?
Yeah, they have to attest to us with our tax dollars, so, and we'll remind them as we continue with this year. I don't know where Artemis is in his stage of development.
Oh, no, that building-
No, the building's done. That can't be done now.
It's
I'm
all people.
saying even if there's an opportunity to add the lots to do work,
So it's.
I don't take, how I am, Angel, and I think most of I don't think it's, let's turn the rock if we need to.
Yeah, so my understanding that at this point, the further opportunity would be to extend the commercial space. Oh, that's the one thing I left out. There's like a double high commercial space,
Yes.
so width incredibly big. I don't know what's gonna go in there. But I was just saying, look, I'm looking to put a restaurant in there, like part of it, like the entrance is gorgeous. But anyway, I don't have those kind of pockets, but I'd like to go one day when they finally fill it. It's enormous. So they're looking for ideas. If you guys have ideas for like a big tenant,
Target. Joking.
Yeah.
I just gotta notice that family died.
Don is closing.
Listen,
On Third Avenue?
22nd century, everything's coming through a warehouse. Storefronts are gonna disappear. Oh, I'm sorry, let me close the meeting.
Actually, wanted to introduce myself to the board. I didn't know if you did that during the new business process.
No, but you can introduce. yourself.
Okay, so, all right, my name is Claudette Brady. I am the new executive director for Safe Harlem Now. Two comments, the Harlem Savings Bank projects, we are aware of it. We've chosen not to do it, frankly, because we don't have the bandwidth and we're dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff. Two things, you should be receiving from the Landmarks Preservation Commission a monthly report. You should have gotten the first one last week.
I get it monthly.
Yeah, so that came out of a ongoing conversation that we had with them, Safe Harlem Now and other preservation organizations in New York City around demolition and trying to save at-risk buildings. We lost 4 buildings in Harlem already this year. What else? We will be doing a bunch of workshops for homeowners in historic districts, both state and national registry districts, about tax credits, grants, and other programming. I'll come back and talk to you about that soon. Other thing is that there's some new legislation out, part of the, I don't know if you're aware of this, part of the, One House bill is a proposal to raise the par, to lift the par, not raise the par, to lift the par. The legislation is very vague. And then there's also a faith-based regulation, which is State Regulation 7791, which is pretty much reducing restrictions for faith-based organizations building affordable housing. Far as Carrie's going, one of the things that we hope to do once she gets this bid in place is to do National Trust Main Street with her on that side. My background, so you know where I'm coming from. I'm originally from that side. I landmarked 2 districts in Bedford-Stuyvesant, was able to get secure state and national registry tax certification there. Did a Main Street project with Christie Development Corporation, produced a Edward Albee play in protest for closing Interfaith Hospital, which succeeded. And have been served on Community Board 3 Brooklyn's land use committee since about 2008. So sort of kind of know land use and landmarks like I know myself. And we will be commenting. We are reviewing all a certificate of appropriateness that comes through to landmarks for Community Board 9, 10, and 11. And what else are we doing with LPC? I'm doing this fast now, you're making me rush.
You can take your time.
Okay, Harlem African Burial Ground. It's just been announced that the Bridge Philanthropic Consulting will be the lead on that. Save Harlem Now, along with Cotty and the Spitzer Place Memory Incubator, had put in as to do this engagement. Unfortunately, we weren't chosen. However, as a group that has coalesced around this issue, we plan on doing work about the Harlem burial ground, even though we're not gonna get paid, because it is something that is important to us as members of the African diaspora. Anything else, Karen? Did I miss anything?
Are there any,
Oh,
you guys?
5G towers. I am a 5G, I am a certified, see, this is why, 5G certified consulting party on 5G towers for 9, 10, and 11 those historic districts, and also state national historic districts, LPC designated districts, and also eligible districts on the state and national registry. If you're not a consulting party, maybe you might want to join. There is some talk, we met with, Robert, I can't remember his name, this weekend, and he is talking about maybe proposed change in design on the current towers that look like space beacons for aliens. What's
your name again?
Claudette Brady.
I was just gonna say the term at-risk building, can you define what that is? Because that might be new to.
So at-risk buildings are buildings that are at risk of demolition by neglect or by, mostly by neglect. So one of the buildings that. Landmark buildings. So the 4 buildings that we lost this year were buildings that were vacant for a significant period of time. They're boarded up. DOB comes by, they go, oh, they're boarded up, they're fine, but you know, our thing is like, okay, but there's a leak on the roof, and as we all know, a pinhole leak in a building that's vacant for 10 years is completely destructive. Part of the thing that LPC will be doing with the fire department now is having drones look at the roof, so they're doing a lot more actions and looking at safeguarding these buildings before we reach the point of demolition. We are actually physically surveying all the historic districts to pinpoint those buildings that may be at risk of demolition. And LPC, with that information, we're working with LPC and DOB to force homeowners to take corrective action.
Thank you. Welcome to the district.
You're welcome.
Anyone have any questions? Excellent. That being said, meeting is adjourned at 8:35 PM. Thank you for your service. Sign in anything. Name one time you signed in 2 years.